Good evening. Let us go back for a moment to last night and clear up the subject of body, because then you will have an easier time with the healing work. First of all, if you start with the first chapter of Genesis, and you should, you learn that in the beginning God is the infinite allness of being. Then you have everything made in the image and likeness of God. You have a spiritual creation in which you don't even have to plant crops, because they're in the ground even before the seed is planted. You don't have to have marriage in order to have children. Everything is spiritually conceived. It is a spiritual universe. It is perfect. You can imagine that in that life you would have no need of truth teachings or churches, since perfection already exists and is fully and completely expressed. This is a spiritual universe functioning under the laws of God. Now, in the second chapter of Genesis, you find a whole new world, a whole new creation. This time, you have to plant seeds in order to have a crop. In this world, an individual being alone is not full and complete. He has to have a partner to make for that completeness. And so he finds a wife. But even as man and wife, they are not complete. And they have to have children, or a child. But even with a child, they are not complete. They have to have another. And by this time, you have discovered that there is both good and evil. There are good children and bad children. You are no longer in that original universe of God. You are no longer in the original universe of self-completeness in God, in God fulfilling himself as individual being. Now, this world of the second chapter of Genesis is a mind world. It is a mind creation. And all of its forms are forms constituted of the substance of mind. And there you have what we now call our physical bodies, or our material bodies. But note this, that they are not material, they are mental. So we go back to the illustration of our ice. No, not our ice first. We'll start with water, steam, and ice. And I will say to you that there is no such thing as water, steam, or ice. These are three names given to one substance called H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. And when you have this 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, you have water. But you also have steam, and you also have ice, but it's still 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part water. In other words, the substance is 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part water. the name at one level of vibration or form is water, the name at another level is steam, the name at another level is ice. But the substance is always the same, H2O. Now, so it is with this universe. Mind is the substance of this universe. And at one level, it is the incorporeal essence mind, but at another level, it is flesh. The flesh of your body, which in one part is flesh and another part bone, another part blood, another part hair. But believe it or not, all of it is mind at different, call it vibrations or forms or formations, but always mind. And that is why this universe is receptive and responsive to the activity of mind. Therefore, if I wish my hand to go up, my mind must first declare it, and the hand must obey. It has no power of disobedience, because its very essence and substance is the same as that which is making the decree. And so it is, whether I give or whether I withhold, whether I pet or whether I punch. It isn't the hand that does it, it is mind. And because the body is mind, it responds. That is why we can't all like each other in the same way, we can't all love each other in the same way, because we do not respond primarily to the body, to the flesh. At our more animal stage we do, but the higher we go in consciousness, the less we respond to the physical attraction, and the more we find something in each other at the higher level of mind. And so it is then that it isn't the bodies that attract each other, it is we at the level of mind. Now, since mind is composed of both good and evil, we have in manifestation both good and evil. Therefore, on the level of humanity, a mind imbued with truth is a blessing and can be a healing influence and is of necessity a loving influence. A mind, your mind or my mind, imbued with truth is a power of attraction, is love, is harmony, is even healing. A mind, your mind or my mind, imbued with the opposite of truth, hate, envy, malice, greed, lust, becomes a very evil influence unto the person who has that mind, and a very unhealthy influence to those around them who do not know how to protect themselves from such a mind. Now, this picture that I am drawing for you is the picture of humanity. It is the picture of you and me when we are purely human, before we have found a spiritual or mystical teaching, or before the finger of God has touched us spiritually. And so it is then that you will find books being written about the power of thought and how you can grow plants by knowing truth, having good thoughts in your mind, and how you can wither them by having bad thoughts or withering thoughts or ugly thoughts in your mind. And it is perfectly true on the human level. And so it is that a mind, and I'm speaking, remember, of your mind or my mind or your neighbor's mind, when it is imbued with truth, when it is following truth teachings seriously, such a mind is an influence for good. But the same mind, if it allows itself to come down from the level of truth and indulge these human emotions, fear, doubt, atheism, lack, and all the other negative things that I have mentioned heretofore, you become, or the individual becomes, a menace to themselves and a danger to all others, or at least an unpleasant presence to all others, except those who know how to protect themselves from the thoughts of humans, individual or collective. Now, if this is the stage at the human level, remember this is no longer true when you have turned to the Spirit and have started to become obedient to the Master. If you abide in the Word of God, if you let the Word of God abide in you, if you keep your mind stayed on God, as you become more and more immersed in praying without ceasing, we call this practicing the presence of God, you come to an inner stillness which enables you to meditate. As you become more and more proficient in meditation, you make contact with an inner being, an inner self, the divine self of you, that which is your God nature or God being, and from then on, you are not physical and you are not mental, you are spiritual, and in some measure you have returned to the Father consciousness and live by grace, not by taking thought. Now, in the human level, you live by taking thought. You live by either physical might or mental power. But at this stage, you live not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit. And at that stage, the material laws are less operative in your experience, and the mental laws are less operative in your experience, and eventually you get to that place where you are perhaps 80 or 90% freed of the results of material or mental law. In other words, there may be infections and contagions about, there may be epidemics of grip or flu or something else, but you do not get it. You may be in a draft or get your feet wet, but you do not catch cold. You may eat wrong foods or right foods, but you are not unduly upset. You may even eat poison foods, and very quickly they pass from you, leaving no evil effect. And even if you are diseased through this living in the Spirit, either suddenly or gradually, one way or the other, the diseases begin to leave your body and do not re-enter. So it is, you must always remember that in this human picture, we are dealing not with matter, but with mind. Mind appearing as matter, mind appearing as form, mind appearing as effect. And therefore, there is no effect in the body except that which is accepted through the mind. Once you understand this, you have the power yourself to accept or reject the appearances, the temptations of this world, until you go higher into the spiritual realm, where neither material law nor mental law operates in your experience, not to the extent of 100% while you are on earth, but surely 75, 80, 85, 90% of the world's discords and inharmonies evaporate, and even if problems do come, they are either quickly met or they are far less in intensity, except the problems that we bring on ourselves by a continuing in the human life. Now, let us realize this, that if we have a family, parents, wife, husband, children, to a certain extent we cannot make our own demonstration as completely as we would, because we are always making concessions for the members of our family who will not live on this plane of consciousness, and we are not all prepared to obey the Master when he says, well, leave your mother and your father and your sister and your brother for my sake. Well, you either do that or else make up your mind that the discords and inharmonies or lacks which come to you by remaining with your family, that you are willing to pay that price for remaining with your family. Because even we in this room, if we stayed together as a class, could not make our full and complete demonstration, because some members of the class would be slower than others, and we would have to help them, and therefore we would come down out of our spiritual household. Or if a teacher tied himself to the student body, the teacher never could make their full and complete demonstration, as indeed few teachers can, because they do accept the responsibility for their students, and they will come down from the highest estate in order to help them. But these are the burdens which the Master said we could drop at his feet because his yoke was easy. In other words, he could bear it more easily than you can for the time being. And so do all responsible spiritual teachers take upon themselves the work of standing by with their students in their problems, because it's easier for the teacher to bear with these burdens than it is for the student. But always remember this, that if you hope to attain your demonstration in its fullness, you'll have to leave mother and brother and go off and be all alone while you're doing it. But most of us won't. Now, when you understand this, you will more nearly understand the subject of treatment and healing work in the message of the infinite way. Let me illustrate. I have here quite a few questions on the subject of treatment and healing work, and one question as to whether or not the infinite way and Christian Science differ from each other. The difference between Christian Science and the infinite way is the difference between one side of the world and the other. The only points at which they agree are in those basic truths which are common to all spiritual and mystical teachings, but on all others they disagree. If not disagree, at least diverge. Let us not use the word disagree, but rather diverge. They differ in approach. It would take more than all of the hours given to this class to tell you all of the distinctions and differences, but you can find them by studying my writings, if before that you are already familiar with the Christian Science teachings. But before you make comparisons, be sure that you do know what the principles of Christian Science are. Otherwise you will have nothing with which to compare them. Now, for yourself, you will see one difference, a tremendous one, when I give you these principles of infinite way healing. This is number one. God constitutes individual being. God is the life, the soul, the spirit, the mind of individual being. God is the law unto individual being. Even your body is the temple of God. God constitutes your being, individual being, and therefore the nature of individual being is godly or good. In him, individual being, there is nothing that defileth or maketh a lie, and never has been. God constitutes individual being. Whether at this moment that being appears to you as a fellow student in this room, or a prisoner in prison, or sick in the hospital, or in a mental institute, regardless of what the appearance may be, the basic point of our healing work is God constitutes individual being. God alone appears as individual being in whom there is no fault. With this approach, you see, there is no use to look to you or to your patient for the cause of error or for the wrong thinking that produced error, because there can't be any wrong thinking in God appearing as individual being, the individual being that is constituted of the nature, character, and quality of God. Therefore, there is no such thing as a mental cause for a physical effect, because we are not in the physical or the mental realm. We are in the realm of God and His Son, heir of God, joint heir, which indeed, and in your spiritual identity, you are. And He is, and she is, and it is, regardless of the appearance that may be presenting itself to you. Now remember that if you do not spend quite a bit of time on this first point, you will be led astray when it comes to the second and the third points. The reason is this: you can understand now that you do not take the name of your patient into a treatment, and that you do not ever, under any circumstances, give your patient a treatment. Please remember that, and you'll know how far you are from any metaphysical or spiritual healing approach. Under no circumstances do you take the name or identity of your patient into your treatment, or their disease, or their condition, or the name of it. Why? Because God constitutes the identity of individual being, and there is no other, and you are going to accept no other into your consciousness. Cease ye from man whose breath is in his nostril, for wherein is he to be accounted of? At this point you may say, how does your patient get the benefit of this? Number one, your patient has probably reached out to you for help, or someone has reached out to you on their behalf, or you have become aware of someone needing help, apparently, and you are about to give the treatment because of that appearance that has touched you. And therefore, because of that contact which is now existing between you and the patient, they are going to receive the benefit of it. In other words, we will assume now that you have asked me for help, any one of you, and I recognize, of course, that it's Mrs. Jones who has asked for help, but that ends Mrs. Jones in my treatment. Now I close my eyes to Mrs. Jones and I turn myself inwardly to God. The first word in my treatment is God. God constitutes individual being. God constitutes individual identity. God is the only life of all being. God is the only mind. God is the only law operating. God is the only law functioning. God is the only being. And beside God, there is no other. When I have established that truth firmly in my consciousness, so that I'm no longer thinking of my patient, I now turn to point number 2. What about this appearance? This case of flu, this infection, this contagion, this epidemic. Ah, yes. The second point covers the revelation which came to me early in my healing ministry and upon which my entire career has been built. It is the point that separates the work that I've done for 30 years from all other metaphysical work. It is this: evil, regardless of its name or nature, is never personal. It does not have its rise in you, or in me, or in him, or in her, or in it. Therefore, I never have to heal you, or reform you, or improve you, or enrich you, because there is no evil in you. God constitutes your being. And only that which is God in expression is true of you. Therefore, you are ageless, diseaseless, painless, perfect, spiritual, incorporeal. But this evil, whether in the form of sin, false appetite, lust, greed, infection, contagion, unemployment, discord, mental aberration, call it what you will, has its source in what of old was called the devil, which later Paul termed the carnal mind, which still later Mrs. Eddy called mortal mind. Now, all evil, regardless of its name, nature, or form, has its origin not in you. We need not uncover any error in your thought. There isn't any. All evil, regardless of its name or nature, has its source in, let us for the moment call it, the carnal mind or mortal mind. By doing this, we have impersonalized it, and we have separated it from you. Until we have done that, we cannot succeed with our healing work in the infinite way, because if we haven't done that, we have an erroneous you, and we've got to do something about you or to you. And we are not a psychological or mental healing method, nor are we a faith healing method that believes God can do something for you. God has already done it. In the first chapter of Genesis, He made you in His own image and likeness, looked upon you and found you good. And because of the omnipotence of God, you haven't changed. Now, evil then has nothing to do with you. True, temporarily in your ignorance, you have accepted it as if it were you or yours, but we are dealing now with the ministry of healing spiritually, and this calls for one individual to be one with God, to know the truth that will make you free. And the first truth is that this evil, this error, has nothing to do with you. It has its rise in the carnal or mortal mind. Once we've got it out there, we really have disposed of about 2/3 of it, because we've left you free in God. But we have to go the other third, which is the third point of the infinite way. The second point impersonalizes the evil. The third point nothingizes it. And the manner of it is this: did God create a carnal or mortal mind? In other words, did God create something evil? No, God looked upon his work and called it good. He found no evil in it whatsoever. Therefore, since God did not create a carnal or mortal mind, there is no carnal or mortal mind. There is no law to support the activity of a carnal or mortal mind. God has not ordained a carnal or mortal mind. He hasn't created it, nor has he created a law to support any such thing as that which would be destructive to God or God's creation. Therefore, this that you have called the carnal mind or mortal mind actually is nothing but the second chapter of Genesis. They ate the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In other words, all there is to carnal mind is a universal belief, not your belief, not mine. Remember, it existed before we were ever thought of. It is a universal belief in two powers, a power of good and a power of evil, and there are no such two powers, for God never created them. Now, to understand this correctly, I'm going to take you back somewhere before the memory of man knoweth, and tell you that some great mystic thousands of years ago must have realized the full and complete truth, because he called all evil the devil, the evil one, or the one evil. Therefore, there can't be millions or billions of evil ones. There is only one evil. There is only an evil one. And this mystic must have perceived that this one evil, this evil one or devil, was not a power, but a temptation. Because later we have the Master, Christ Jesus, tempted of the devil. He was already a master. He was already the Son of God. But he was tempted of the devil. And if you will notice now, the devil stands before Jesus and tempts him, and is rejected, and he tempts him again and is rejected, and tempts him again and is rejected. And now what happens to the devil and his evil? It hasn't done anything to anybody. Nothing has happened to anybody. The devil has been nothingized, because the devil, the source of evil, the temptation, is not power unless Jesus accepts it. But Jesus doesn't, proving that evil has no power except such as we give it by our acceptance of it. Evil in and of itself is but a tempter, tempting us to believe in two powers, good and evil. If we accept one power and somebody offers us name or fame, we can say, oh no, whatever name or fame I'm entitled to, the one power will see to it that I have. When the devil tempts us with sin, with satisfaction, we don't have to accept it, because the one power to which we have given ourselves can give us all that the world can give us and much more beside. And so it is then, we always are in the position when infection, contagion, heredity, lack, limitation, depression, accident, war, when any of these tempt us, we always have the ability to stand as did the Master and say, get thee behind me, Satan. And what happens to Satan, whatever happened to him standing before the Master, is what happens when Satan, in the form of a patient, tempts the practitioner to believe in two beings, a spiritual one and a human one. When the devil stands before the practitioner in the form of a patient, trying to convince the practitioner in the reality of sin or disease or death or old age or lack or limitation or accident or wars or threats of wars, the practitioner will have no success if they first accept the devil in the form of a patient and then try to get rid of them or overcome them or destroy them or remove them. No, the practitioner in the infinite way must reject temptation appearing as a patient and understand that what is appearing as a patient with a myriad of claims is but the devil tempting him to believe in two creators, two powers. A creator that creates man in his own image and likeness and then creates a carnal mind to destroy it. Well, you know that as a student of the infinite way, you are dedicated to the principle of one power. You do not use the power of truth to overcome evil. You do not turn to God to have him heal somebody or reform somebody or employ somebody or enrich somebody. In the message of the infinite way, you must take your stand on God as constituting individual being, God as the only law of this universe. And then you reject every appearance, whether it comes to you as a person or a condition, and you throw it off into that word carnal mind or mortal mind. And then you look at it and ask it, did God make you? Does God ordain you? Has God created a law to support you? No. All right. Then you're nothing. You don't have to be accepted. You can be rejected. You are not even a you. And it is not even an it. And thus you have nothingized it. To me, one of the easy ways to do that is to think of Hezekiah when his people told him that the enemy outnumbered us and have these many weapons. And Hezekiah replied, they have but the arm of flesh. We have the Lord God Almighty. And they rested in his word. And then the enemy destroyed itself, fought among themselves, and destroyed themselves. And so to me, when I am presented with error of any name or nature, the first thought comes to my mind is, This is but temporal power, the arm of flesh, nothingness. And then by resting in that, somehow or other the discords have a way of evaporating, disappearing, proving that they had no existence whatsoever as reality. They had an existence only as a part of the belief in good and evil, that which really threw Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden. In proportion as you have two powers, you also are thrown out of the Garden of Eden. In proportion as you can come into the awareness of God as one infinite all-power, you are restored to the Garden of Eden in your spiritual wholeness and completeness. Now, you see that the healing work of the infinite way is completely dependent on your ability to realize that we do not use one power over another. We do not use the power of truth over evil. We do not hold on to a right thought or a good thought. We do not use truth. We do not use God. We are not interested in why the individual has been brought to this condition, because we already know. Having been born a human being, they were born into the belief of good and evil. That's why they're this way, whether they're in sin or disease or lack. They wouldn't be in any of those things if they hadn't been born into the human scene, or being born into the human scene if their parents had started in even before birth to realize this life is the life of God, and it is not subject to the material or mental beliefs of man whose breath is in his nostril, and there is only one power, and that is not the power of matter or mind. It is the power of life itself, the life of this individual, which embodies within itself the power of eternality and immortality. This, you see, constitutes the treatment work. Now, treatments, of course, can be infinite in variety, because you could not use what I have just said as a formula, because you are presented with this evil, this one evil, in infinite form and variety. And so it is that each treatment may embody within itself different statements, different ideas that present themselves, but they must always end with these 3 points. They must begin and end with these 3 points in order to be a complete infinite way treatment. For instance, one of the major problems that are brought to us as practitioners is that of family relationships, human relationships. It may have to do with man and wife, or parent and child, or brother and sister, or it may have to do with employer and employee. It may have to do with neighbors. But in some way or other, probably the major problem that comes to us is that of human relationships. Well, now, and you'll find the answer to this in particular in the chapter Love Thy Neighbor in the book Practicing the Presence. You will find all of the principles embodied in treatment work on the subject of human relationships at any level in that chapter. So, when we are presented with a problem of that nature, the very first thing we have to remember is that since God is infinite, we are not dealing with 2 people, 4 people, 8 people. We are dealing with one infinite God, one infinite divine love, one infinite intelligence, infinitely manifested. And so it is that there's only one life, one will, one desire, one satisfaction, one being, and in that oneness, harmony is restored in all forms of relationships. And then, of course, we have to deal with the fact that, oh no, there are discords here. What of them? They have nothing to do with this man or this wife. They have nothing to do with this parent or this child. They have nothing to do with this employer or this employee. Whatever the nature of the discord, it has its source in the carnal mind. Now let's look at the carnal mind. Whence came you? Who created you? What law supports or sustains you? Nothing. Well, that's the arm of flesh, temporal power, nothingness. A belief in two powers, a belief in good and evil. But as the practitioner, we have no belief in good and evil, and one with truth is a majority. Now you see, we have not brought any power to bear. We have not turned to God and asked for a God power. We have realized the non-power of the universal belief in evil, in the source of evil, in the devil, carnal mind or mortal mind. Now, when you are faced with a condition or person, and you can say, oh, that's mortal mind or carnal mind, you will have a quick and possibly an instantaneous healing if at the same time you can realize that the term carnal mind or mortal mind means nothingness. But if the term carnal mind or mortal mind means something that you will have to battle or fight or overcome, you are lost. And you might as well turn to somebody else for your help. In other words, you may not accept Paul's statement that the carnal mind is enmity against God. You must refute that with every breath in your body. The carnal mind is not enmity against God, because God has no enemies, no opposites. God has never created anything or anybody at any time to be destructive to God or to the works of God or to the children of God. Therefore, the carnal mind is not enmity against God. The carnal mind is a liar, the father of lies, and nothingness. 10 times multiplied, nothingness. 1,000 times multiplied, nothingness. And now multiply it 1 billion, if you like, and it is still nothingness. Therefore, you must remember this. Every evil that presents itself to you is presenting itself as a mental imposition, or what is termed malpractice. But because of that, you can rest in peace. Unless you accept mental imposition, unless you accept malpractice as a power, it is nothing, no time, nowhere, no how. It is just the arm of flesh. You need not fear all the malpractice in the world, individual or collective. And as a matter of fact, it will help you to shorten your treatments if I tell you that every claim that has ever come to you yourself or that has ever been presented to you by anyone else is a form of malpractice, a universal malpractice of the carnal or mortal mind. And because of that, healing is very simple, because malpractice isn't a power. Malpractice is a belief in two powers. Malpractice is a belief in good and evil. Once you accept this, you will find that your healing work improves and your healings come more quickly. Because now, every time any form of error is presented to you through yourself, your family, your children, your patients, your students, just smile and remember, this is the devil standing out here in front of Jesus. Can't do a thing unless I accept it. It's a mental imposition. The devil wasn't outside of Jesus, you know that. There was a tempter within himself, tempting him with those final temptations before he attained the full realization of his Christhood. You'll find that every one of us on the spiritual path receive plenty of temptations, but the final three, after we have gotten onto the spiritual path and fancied ourselves beyond temptation, that's when the three big fellows come. And that's what takes most people out of the metaphysical field. That's what takes them out of the healing work once they've been on it. One of these or more of these three big temptations. And be assured that they only come after you're in the practice. They only come after you're convinced that now you're above temptation. Then the big wallopers come. And then it is that you have to realize that this is a mental imposition. I will give you another name for it. Your true name is Christ. That is your spiritual identity. You are the Son of God, the Christ of God. You are the divine image and likeness. You are heir of God, joint heir with Christ and God, the Son of God, the Christ of God. Then this mental imposition under any name is Antichrist. This is something to tempt you into the belief that you're a human being and that you have sin-filled thoughts or an empty pocketbook or a diseased body. This is Antichrist. This is trying to argue against your Christhood. So if you like, you can treat almost any claim that comes to you with that word, Antichrist. Mental imposition, trying to deny my Christhood, my self-sufficiency in God, my self-completeness in God. Antichrist. But don't fight it. Oh, don't be like Paul. Don't fight error. Don't get in a battle with it. You lose. Because it's all going on in your imagination. Don't fight it. Realize its nothingness. Realize its nature. And now you'll understand when you go back and read over my writings again why on page after page I say to you the major point of this teaching is the nature of error. Unless you know the impersonal nature of error and its nothingness, well, with 4 billion people on earth, if they all become your patients, you've got 4 billion battles to heal them, to reform them, to enrich them, to employ them. How are you ever going to take care of a really worthwhile practice? You can't do it. There's only one way you can really take care of a large practice, and that is to learn how to impersonalize evil. Now, you can't give group treatments. Don't think you can sit down and in one treatment treat all of the 10, 20, or 30 people who are looking to you for help, because you can't. The way you prevent that is this. Whenever an individual touches your consciousness, that is the moment when you give your treatment. Whether they telephone to you or write to you, or whether you pass them on the street, the moment you become aware of a person or condition of evil, at that second you must give the treatment. And it makes a difference whether you're cooking a meal or whether you're doing a work as fine as cutting and polishing a diamond. It makes no difference how concentrated you may be on something else. Only at the moment that the claim touches your consciousness can you give the treatment. And if you say, I'll give you a treatment tonight, you may have delayed your healing for 6 months or a year, and no one's responsible but you. If you say, I'll give you a treatment tomorrow morning or 10 minutes from now, you've accepted the devil and you've said, now, 10 minutes from now, I'll get rid of him. The only time you can reject an appearance is when it reaches your consciousness. When it impinges itself upon you, you must make the decision. This is Antichrist. I'm finished with it. It's nothing. Or this is a mental imposition. I'm finished with it. Or this is carnal mind. It has nothing but temporal power. What is temporal power? Well, when Materia Medica tells you that germs are infectious or contagious, that's temporal power, because it does have power in the temporal world. But it doesn't to those who have the Lord God Almighty, the one power. Therefore, the very moment someone tells you there is an epidemic of Asian flu on the way, that is the minute in which you must give your treatment, and not tonight. That minute. This is a mental imposition. This is Antichrist. This is the devil tempting me to believe in two powers. Do you see that? In the infinite way, you do not need a great God power to do something to a devil power. The devil power isn't power, and you need to know that. And one with God is a majority. Therefore, all of your healing work must be done quickly, spontaneously, but specifically. You can't go to sleep over an infinite way treatment. You can't go to sleep over an infinite way prayer or meditation. You have got to be alert. And you've got to be quick, and you've got to be sharp, and you've got to be powerful in realizing nothingness. But if you do it with a fuzzy mind, you've got a fuzzy treatment. If you do it without knowing specifically what this principle is, you're not in the infinite way at all. You're just playing around with truth. In our work, we have no room whatsoever for those who want to dream their life away, hoping that there's some kind of a miracle power going to do something for them. We don't know of any. We haven't found any. There is the presence and power of Christ. And this presence and power is transcendental. It is the fourth dimensional consciousness, and you attain it in proportion as you know that there's only one power. Nobody ever attains the mystical consciousness, certainly not the healing consciousness, while they're looking around for a God power to do something to an evil, or while they're trying to correct the wrong thinking with right thinking, or while they're trying to improve some human being so that they can first be good and then be worthy of God. Utter nonsense. You have to be able to say to the woman taken in adultery, neither do I condemn thee. You have to be able to look the men and women in prison right in the eye and say, God constitutes your being, and whatever you're in here for, it was your ignorance of the fact of your true identity and of the fact that this evil that tempted you never was a power. You gave it power by accepting it. You can't say that outright. To those men, of course not. They wouldn't know what you're talking about. It has to be a part of your silent treatment.